So,
yeah, this is two truly marvelous papers. So I guess when I was invited to give a talk at the computational and formal proofs workshop, I was assumed to be speaking about my work on relating the two approaches. So I apologize for not doing so. Instead, what I'll do is I'll talk about a research direction that I recently became interested in, which has to do with investigating how far security defined through game-based experiments, how far these notions are composable. So how composable are these notions? So this talk is based on two papers with Christina, Mark, Nigel, and Steve. Okay. Not point out that this is not my name. I was told that I misspelled my name. So please continue calling me Bogdan, not Bogdan. So now let me move on. So I'll talk about compositional security for key exchange in the context for game-based security in the context of key exchange. We have some other works on in other contexts, but this is what I'll be focusing on today. So key exchange is a foundational notion. It allows to remote parties A and B to communicate with each other and establish a shared key. So this shared key is going to be used for something later, and this is why key exchange gives a very good test case for frameworks that aim to deal with compositionality. Because what we want is that after running a key exchange to establish a common key and then using the key in an application protocol, typically a secure channel. And here's a prominent example, the transport layer security protocol, which has exactly this structure. There's a key exchange phase, to which I'll refer to the TLS exchange, and there is a record layer protocol, which essentially implements an authenticated channel. So what do you want from this kind of protocols? So what do you want? So we want secure composition. And when do you want it? Forever, all the time. Actually, the better question is, how do you want it? And how do you want it? We want it to get it modularly. So what do I mean by this? So ideally, one would analyze the two components separately, and using some high-level theorem would put the two things together and conclude that the result is secure. Now, what does it mean for the result to be secure mean? It's really up to you, and depends on your affinities with cryptography. So if you prefer simulation-based definitions, then you can give a simulation-based notion of security for this big protocol that I got. But you can also give a game-based definition for the same protocol, where you just have to specify how an adversary interacts with this protocol and what are his aims and goals, and then show that no adversary can actually reach his goals. All right, so there is an obvious answer for cryptographers and even for non-cryptographers that have been interested in composition, which is we can get secure composition and we can get modular secure composition using universal composability. This is a very nice framework, and it allows you to do the following. So here I'll skip over many details. I'll just give some high-level points. So it allows you to do the following. It allows you to analyze a single session of the protocol in isolation and compare it with some sort of idealized version of the protocol. And UC security demands that no environment can tell the difference between these two instances. So what you get as a consequence is that the protocol maintains its security properties no matter what other protocols are being run on the network. So this is a very nice framework. And why can't we use this, or why I think we can't use this? We can't use this because universal composability is very strong, or it's a bit too universal. And I'll talk about two issues that through which I'm trying to make this point that the UC is too universal. So one is that think about what I just said. So you analyze a single session of the protocol in isolation and show it indistinguishable from an idealized session. And then what you get is that you can compose this session with anything else on the network. So you do very little work, and then you get a lot of guarantees. Where do the guarantees come from? The guarantees come from, partially, from the fact that the basic UC framework already duplicates in the basic level things that protocol already have implemented in their design. To explain this point a little bit better, so one thing that you don't want to do is for an adversary to be able to forward messages between two different sessions of the same protocol between different parties. And this you have to avoid this somehow, but you have analyzed the protocol in isolation. So what the way this is avoided in the UC is by assuming through several mechanisms, but one of these mechanisms is the way that parties address the protocol. And this is through some session identifiers, which are assumed to be established before the protocol is executed. This is one issue. A second issue regards the issue of joint state. So I have analyzed a single session of this protocol in isolation. But now when the protocol is executed, if multiple sessions of this protocol are executed, these sessions may share some state. For example, the typical example is the long-term keys that are used in the sessions. If this happens, the basic UC theorem does not guarantee composability. So you do not get composition of the protocol if it is being run with other sessions of the same protocol if there is some joint state that is being reused. So
it's not too universal, it's not enough universal.
Well, you can make it too universal now. So so this is the basic framework does not give all universality that you want, because you cannot run the protocol with itself if you have sessions of the same protocol. But there is a patch to the framework, which is the juicy theorem, the universal composability framework, theorem with joint state. And that theorem actually lets you conclude that if you analyze the protocol in isolation, blah, 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 I'll not skip details, then you can conclude that the protocol is going to be secure even if you share state. However, the protocol for which you conclude security when you share state is not the same protocol that you have analyzed in isolation. What this means is that you start with a protocol, you analyze it, and then you use the juicy theorem, and what you get is a different protocol, which is not the one that you think you analyzed. All right. Other reasons why UC may not be too good is that it is very demanding. So it demands a lot. In order for a protocol to be UC secure, there's a lot of, cryptography that has to be used. There are many examples of protocols that are not UC secure, yet they do satisfy reasonable notion of security if you look at them using games. So one last point that I want to make is that I think UC is being cut a lot of slack when it comes down to dealing with adaptive corruption. So this is a really difficult, this is a security against adversaries that can adaptively corrupt parties is really difficult to achieve in the UC framework. And you have to resort to notions of security for encryption, like non-committing encryption, which is not something that you can actually implement in practice. So, and there is this result by Nielsen which says that if you wanted to do secret message transmission in the presence of adaptive corruptions, then you need either very long, arbitrarily large keys or random oracles. All right, so now I'm on tape, stating that UC is not that great. I thought, should I sign this? I signed it. So I have to explain how do I propose to deal with this issue. I'm not planning to replace UC. But what I want to show is that one can use the one can use game-based notions of security and still derive general and generic composition theorems. So why use game-based? One reason is that game-based are very well understood. So if you look at well, this is I guess a conjecture of mine. If you take the set of cryptographers that understand UC and the set of cryptographers that understand games, I think the first one is a very small subset of the latter one, which says that not that the framework is bad. It says that the framework is hard to understand. So whereas I think the games framework is easier to understand. So games are more permissive, so you can analyze protocols that UC declares insecure, and then you can actually declare them secure using games. And although adaptive corruption is not a walk in the park, it's hard to get adaptive corruption even with games. It is not us. So results regarding adaptive corruptions can be obtained. So what's the problem with games? Why haven't been games used before to look at composition issues? I believe is that because the games are not very well structured. So it's hard to imagine I have a game that I have a protocol that satisfies game 1, another protocol satisfies game 2. How can you put these two things together in a generic way? So I'll not show a generic composition. So what I'll show is that if you know what you're after, and in this case is composition of key exchange with arbitrary symmetric tasks, then you can come up with general compositional principles. So I'll talk about two theorems. The first theorem deals with the case when the key exchange and the symmetric application protocol that uses keys are completely disjoint. There's no interference except by passing the key from the first stage to the second stage. And the second theorem deals with the case when there's more interference between the two parts, and I'll give an example and about what do I mean a bit later in the talk. Okay, so forget UC. Let's look at games. Let's look at Phil. So what I'll argue is that the original notion of security for key exchange due to Bellari and Rogaway is composable. So here I have a slide where I'm trying to represent the game that they have devised in a convenient way for me. Not necessarily for your understanding, but I'll try hard, but for me to be able to move to the next slide. So what do we have here? So here we have an adversary. This is more impressive, I think. So here we have an adversary A that will interact with many sessions of the key exchange protocol that we're analyzing, and these many sessions are being maintained by a challenger. So the light blue part maintains the execution of the different sessions to which the adversary has access to. So the adversary can do the following: the adversary can start new sessions, can drive the execution of the protocol by sending messages to sessions and getting back the result that the session computes, can corrupt the long-term keys of the parties involved in the execution. Importantly, can reveal keys that have been derived in sessions that have completed. So if this session has completed and there is a key, the adversary can ask for the key that has been obtained in that session. And what do we want? We want security for the keys, and security for the keys is defined in a classical indistinguishability-based manner. There is a test query. The test query is aimed at one of these sessions which somehow has not been corrupt. When the adversary issues the test query, the challenger will return either the real key obtained in the session or a random key, depending on some internal bit B that has been sampled at random at the beginning of the execution. So the adversary can essentially drives the execution, corrupts keys, corrupts long-term keys, and his goal is to break the key in one session. how do we when do you say the adversary won? The adversary won if he can guess the bit B. So at some point the adversary will say, my guess is that the key is a real key or a random key. And this equality is B equal D. So this predicate here decides the adversary won or not. So when do we say a protocol is secure? So when is a protocol a good key exchange? Well, here I'm using some notation from the formal proofs side. This is the only point where they mix in my talk. So we say a protocol satisfies this game, meaning the protocol is secure if no adversary can guess the bit B except with probability a half. Any questions about this? All right. So the next step so what I'll do next is I will explain how we can abstract how can one give an abstract formulation for games, and I'll use this picture to explain what's next. So this is an abstraction of an abstraction. So first, our paper contains a formalism for specifying games, but that formalism is boring. So sorry if you're a reviewer of the paper. It's very difficult to read and tedious, but it has to be done. It has to be done because otherwise there's no rigorosity so you can't prove theorems.
Does it have to be accepted?
This one was accepted already, so the other one on the other. So we give an abstract notion for what is a game, and this is an abstraction of that abstraction. Just think about the game on the previous slide, which I have used. So what do we have here? We have an adversary interacting with some protocol which is abstract. The game maintains the state of the execution of the protocol. The game has some game state, which is, for example, the random bit in the case of key exchange. And deciding if the adversary won or not is simply a predicate over the state of the game. So what do you need to specify? You need to specify what are the states and what are the queries of the adversary, and when a query is made, how does the game compute the answer? So far so good? Okay. And then generically we say that protocol P satisfies this game, which I call GSEC for an arbitrary security notion, if no adversary can set this predicate to 1 except with some probability delta. Delta is either 0 or a half, depending if you're looking at authenticity properties or secrecy properties. All right, so next what I'll show is how do you compose games. And I'll do this, as I said, I cannot do this in general, but I'll do it for the case of composing a key exchange with an arbitrary protocol. So if you want to think of a type of protocol that key exchange are composed with, think of secure channels. So what do we have here? So here we have the GK, the Bellaire-Rogoy security notion for key exchange, specified through this game. And here we have an abstract game for abstract security notion for a two-party protocol. So I'm omitting some details. All I need to know is the following: that this protocol, the protocol for which I specify security in this game, needs symmetrically distributed keys to be executed. So I have one game for the key exchange. The adversary can execute the key exchange protocol, and another game for an abstract property. The adversary can interact with that protocol by abstract ways, some abstract queries. So what I'll do is I'll simply glue these two boxes together, and I'll do it as follows. I'll remove the reveal queries. If I have time, I can discuss this, but I'll skip it. I'll remove the reveal queries, and I'll remove the new session queries. And the new sessions for the later stages will simply be triggered when a key is being obtained in the session at the end of the key exchange. So what I get is this picture. So this is simply the two games put together. Now, what can the adversary do? The adversary can interact with the key exchange protocol as it was interacting in the BR game. When a key is being derived, a new session of the letter protocol is started and executed with that key. The queries for the letter protocol are the queries that the adversary was able to use when we simply looked at the security of this protocol in isolation. Okay, so this is how execution proceeds. Now, what does it mean what does it mean for the composition of the protocol that is being run here with the protocol that is being run here to be secure? Well, we simply ignore security of the key exchange. We do not care about keys to be random anymore. What we want is that this predicate cannot be turned true, because this predicate says the letter part has been broken. So if this is a secure channel and I compose a key exchange with a secure channel, what I want is that the secure channel is a secure channel.
The state is a union?
The state, yes. So the state is this state, this state, this state, and this state. Yes. And the predicate, okay, but the predicate is only about on the part of state that corresponds to the letter protocol.
Just a very quick question. So kinetic Kravchuk, didn't they prove some kind of composition saying that Bilari-Rogovoi definition is equivalent to kinetic Kravchuk, so you get the best of both worlds?
Kind of, yes. So they proved that the kinetic Kravchuk definition is a refinement of the Bilari-Rogovoi definition, which is this SK security, implies UC security, kind of. If you change the protocol a little bit by adding, for example, this ACK. So you have to change it on the one hand, and on the other hand, they show equivalence with the UC security in a single session. Then you have to go again through multi-session and join state, and then you modify the protocol. Okay, so I started with a game for the security of the key exchanges and an arbitrary game for the security of secure channels, for example, but this part is abstract. And I defined a game which I call GKE sec, which is the game that defines the security of the key exchange composed with that later task. So this is generic, right? I don't care. This definition does not care about what this later task is for. All right, so BR security is composable. So what do I mean by this? Here's a theorem. The theorem says the following. If you have a key exchange protocol that is BR secure, so satisfies the security notion that I've described at the beginning, this key exchange protocol has something which we call public session matching, and I'll come on this point a bit later. And you have a protocol that satisfies the notion of security GSEC. So for example, this is a secure channel. Then if I first run the key exchange, and then I run the protocol, then the resulting protocol satisfies this security notion, which is the security notion for the composition of the key exchange of the protocol. So before I move to explaining what this points to, what the second bullet, why is the second bullet there, let me give a intuition of how the proof goes. So so the proof goes by reduction. So I show that if there exists an adversary that breaks the composition of the key exchange composed with the protocol, then the protocol satisfies this notion, and this is true, then actually I have to be able to, I'm breaking the key exchange part. All right, so what am I given? I'm given an adversary who interacts with the key exchange and the protocol, and this adversary is able to turn this predicate, is able to set the predicate to 1. So now remember what is the intuition that I used to motivate the security definition, the BR notion of security. That security definition said that these keys are random, look like random keys. Well, if these keys that are being passed from the first stage to the second stage look like random keys, let's assume that they are random keys, then this predicate cannot be set to 1 just because the protocol, I assume that the second protocol is secure, which means that the adversary actually is able to tell real keys from random keys. So a bit more in detail, we start with an adversary that interacts with this game, which is GKE sec. and we construct an adversary that, and we look at that execution and we emulate that execution using separate instances of the game. The game for the key exchange and the game for the whatever the second part is. And now if I put a box around the adversary together the second part, the intuition that I gave before says that if this predicate is turned to 1, then this key is not random. Sorry, then this key is a real key. If this predicate stays 0, then this key is a random key. Okay, so this is not quite true. This is my lying slide. I have some other lying slides, but this is one of them. Actually, this is a step in a hybrid argument. So I didn't try to explain how does this hybrid argument goes. But imagine that all of the other keys are random. So only this key is real or random, and then what I said is true.
So do you need to assume that the adversary can check the winning condition? Because not all cryptographic security definitions you can test the winning condition efficiently.
Yes, I need to assume that, because the adversary will check the predicate. So the predicate has to be efficiently computable given the state. Yes. Okay, so now let me move to this, explain this point with the public session matching. So I said that we're kind of emulating the execution of the key exchange with the protocol, and then we're passing the keys that are obtained from the key exchange to the protocol. And at some point I make a test query, and I'm given a key which is a real or random key, which I'll be using to key one of these sessions here. Well, if this session has interacted with another session, there is another key which is equal to the key derived in this session. And when this session has terminated, I need to pass here a key that is consistent with the key that I use here. So if I'm given k, I need to know where should I use k in the second part. Don't know if I was clear here. Am I clear here? Somewhat clear. So here's where I need the ability to tell which sessions have derived equal keys. Okay, so Evgeny he's thinking hard, so I have to explain again. All right, so when I'm looking at the execution, the keys that are being obtained here I'm using the keys to run sessions of the second protocol. And for one of these sessions, I'm going to be given either the real key or the random key, and that key I'll use to run this protocol. But the same key has been obtained in a potential partner of this session. And I need to know which is this potential partner of the session, because I need to simulate this protocol with the right key. So I need to simulate the protocol with the key that I'm given by the test query. If I cannot tell which key, which sessions are partnered, then I cannot guarantee that the simulation, I can carry out the simulation. So this is where I need this public session matching. So BR or right? Modulo this aspect. Okay, so maybe it looks like this is a artifact of our proof, but we have some sort of converse which kind of strengthens our conviction that actually this is needed. And it's a weak converse. I'll not tell you too much about it, but essentially we show something along the lines: if a key exchange protocol is composable with anything, in the sense that we defined, then we can construct a public session matching. For non-rewinding adversaries, access to coins, and there's a lot of technical details, but a weak converse does hold. So it does seem that the ability of telling which sessions are partnered is important for composition. And this has some implications on how do you define security of key exchange, because when you look at reveal queries, there's two ways of telling what should the experiment do if a reveal query is asked to a session that he shouldn't to a session where he shouldn't learn the key. And there's two options. One option is to say the adversary loses if he does so, and the second option is to say the experiment returns bottom. But they're qualitatively different as far as composition goes, because for the first case, when the adversary loses, you need this condition. You need this condition of session matching to get composition. Whereas if the experiment tells you this is the partner of the test session, then you don't need this public matching. So now you have two equally good ways of defining security of key exchange, but one is composable and one is not. Okay, so BR security is composable, but not all protocols are BR secure. Let me illustrate this point using TLS. So this is an abstraction of TLS. There's many things going on, but the point that is important is that one of the last messages of the protocol is an encryption under the key that is being actually derived by the two parties of 0 and essentially the map of the transcript of the conversation that took place so far. And why do people do this? I don't know. I guess you get a key confirmation guarantee that if I can decrypt and I get something which looks reasonable, then we have exchanged the same key. And this is apparently quite common in protocol design. You want to get this guarantee, and then you use the key a little bit at the end of the protocol to make sure that the parties do have the same key. But this spoils BR security, because if this bit that you do in the end is meaningful only if you have the right key, then you can tell real keys from random keys. For example, here I'm given a key and I have to figure out if it's real or random. I decrypt this message and I see if the plain text starts with a 0. So TLS is not BR secure, unfortunately. So in general, if the key is being used in the protocol, then you don't get BR security. So composition is lost.
Encryption uses authentication here. I would expect you would like match the transcript, right?
Yeah, so I said it's actually a mapped transcript.
Oh, but what's the point of encryption at all? Oh, you're saying encryption?
That's a good point. So on the previous slide I said TLS star. TLS star, if you remove the encryption and you send the MAC in clear, the protocol is BR secure.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Bogdan, that's because a different key is used for the Mac, right? Because the
yeah, you use a different key for the Mac. Sorry, yes, you don't use the same. You use a previously derived key for the Mac, and then out of that you actually derive this key. But you don't use the key that you'll use later. You use a previous key.
So the generic way to get key confirmation would be to get a key, expand it using a PRG.
Of course, yeah, and Kenny has the paper about this generic transformation. That's correct. No, okay, I'll write a paper about this. No, that's well known, and protocols like Ike does that. All right, so what do cryptographers do when they're faced with this problem? Here's the protocol. It looks fine. There's this last message that spoils things. Let's ignore that thing, right? So let's just ignore this message and concentrate on what we call the core cryptographic protocol and analyze that bit. But this doesn't always work. I mean, if it works, fine. You can just ignore that. But it doesn't work because maybe this message that is being sent here has real implications. Like here, it would bind the transcript together. So you can't do that in general. Another possibility is to move this message to the protocol, to the next protocol, and analyze these two parts separately. But it's not clear. Really, I think it seems that really the only way to proceed is the following: just take the composition and analyze the composition monolithically. So show that if I run the key exchange and then I run the protocol, what I get is a protocol that satisfies this notion of security. The notion of security obtained by composing the key exchange with the security of whatever the second part is intended to achieve. And so, for example, in the case of TLS, you'd have to argue that if I run the key exchange for TLS and then I do the record layer, then this would be satisfy this game, which says I run the key exchange and then what I get implements a secure channel of your preference or whatever TLS should get, like LHA, say. And this is in general. If the two parts interact somehow, then I don't think there is real hope to analyzing the two parts completely separately. I conjecture that, but I think it's easy to come up with an example where if I use the key here, I can find the protocol which breaks down if it uses that key.
You're saying there is no way to convince practitioners to remove that last flow?
Oh, don't ask me about practitioners. So okay, I can get to this point later. But apparently, the German implementation of the European passport, with inputs from cryptographers, let's call him Mark. They actually decided to do the confirmation to do a confirmation flow, even if well-known cryptographers say don't do this. But designers, I guess there's some peace of mind you get by, I use the key, it works, it's fine. Okay, so who's the chair?
25 minutes.
Okay.
20 minutes, sorry about that.
Okay, so so what I'll talk about next is a way to regain some modularity. So you can't get completely modular analysis. I don't think it's possible, but you can gain some modularity, and I'll explain what is the level of modularity that you get by through the path that I'm going to discuss now. The intuition behind what I'll talk about next is the following, and I'm using TLS as an example. So if TLS sends this encryption of 0 followed by transcript in the key exchange part, this somehow doesn't spoil the security of the encryption when encryption is used later. So it doesn't break, or I guess it obviously doesn't break privacy. I've just sent an encryption. This encryption should still be private, and it doesn't break authenticity because what I'm the message that I'm sending in this part have a counter which is different from 0. So I use the key to do some encryption, but the encryption when I use it later is still good. So this is the general idea. Let me go over the theorem and try to read the theorem in a different way than I wrote it. So what the theorem that we have says the following. So if you have a key exchange and a primitive such that an adversary cannot break this primitive if the primitive is keyed using with the keys derived through the key exchange. So for example, if the primitive is encryption, then you have a key exchange such that no adversary can break the in-CCA game for encryption if the keys used in the encryption are derived through the key exchange. So the adversary has partial information about the keys, and now he's trying to break security of encryption, and he cannot do that. This is the first condition. The second condition says that I have a protocol, think about it as a secure channel, that satisfies the notion of security. Think about it as a notion of security for secure channel, assuming that this primitive that I started with is secure. So if encryption is secure. And the proof that the protocol is secure is via a reduction to the primitive, which we call key independent, and I'll explain what this means later. Then one can conclude that by running the key exchange and then the protocol stays secure. Okay.
The primitive is used in the protocol.
Yes, because otherwise you would not be able to show this reduction. So the protocol, the security of the protocol really relies on the security of the primitive. So I'll implement for example, an authenticated channel using authenticated encryption with counters to each appended to each message. So the security of this secure channel relies on the security of the encryption. And now if no adversary can break encryption with the keys derived through the key exchange, then the theorem says that no adversary can break the secure channel with the keys derived through the key exchange.
So where are you putting the constraint, let's say that counter is not 0 in this theorem?
Where, let me explain this later. Okay, so let me explain it here, because so the primitive on which the security of this thing relies is going to be security of authenticated encryption, where we do not count forgeries messages that are encryptions of something which starts with a 0. So the primitive that you use here is not pure encryption, but is encryption star. And this is how it shows. So it's a modified version of the encryption. It's essentially, the modification really has to take into account how is encryption used previously. Okay. So this is the theorem. Now, in order to show that the theorem is true, let me go through this key independent reduction business, and let me start with normal reductions. So a normal reduction says the following. So I have some protocol, and then I have some primitive, and I have a security reduction from the and I have a reduction from the security of the protocol to that of the primitive. If for any adversary B that plays the game for the protocol, there's an adversary A that plays the game for the primitive, such that if B breaks the protocol, then A breaks the primitive. And importantly, the probabilities are taken over the coins used by the adversary, the coins used in key generation, and the coins used internally by the games. So intuitively, a key independent reduction does not have the coins for the probabilities are only taken over the adversary and the games, but not over the keys. And now you may ask, where do keys come from in this case? So keys are universally quantified, but it's more than that. We let the adversaries be in charge of setting the keys for the protocol in the primitive. And we demand that the keys that the adversary sets for the protocol are the same as the keys that the adversary sets for the primitive. So let me show you a picture. Picture looks like this. This is again an abstraction of an abstraction of abstraction, but roughly. So we're going to look at two-stage adversaries, where the first stage adversary is only in charge of setting keys to the games in which against which the adversary plays. And then we say that there exists a key independent reduction from the protocol to the primitive if for any two-stage adversaries A1, B2, like this, there exists a two-stage adversary A1, A2. So I left A1 unchanged, such that if the adversary breaks the protocol, then the adversary breaks the primitive. So this is may seem like a very strong demand, because if the keys are 0, the adversary is allowed to set the keys to be all 0 key. But in that case, what we want to get is that if the adversary breaks the protocol because the key has been set to 0, then the adversary breaks the primitive because the key has been set to 0.
So if somehow the protocol uses the key for something else, then
No, we only do if the protocol really relies on the primitive. If the key is used for something else, this doesn't apply. Okay, so you can get back the standard notion of reduction by cutting the communication here and having A1 simply generate real keys. Okay, but keep this picture in mind because it's going to be important in a few slides. So now let me go over the proof of this theorem. So let me remind you, the proof says that if I have if the primitive cannot be broken, even if the keys are obtained via a key exchange protocol, and if the security of the protocol reduces to that of the primitive via key independent reduction, then the protocol cannot be broken even if it uses keys derived by the key exchange. So again, proof by contradiction. Let's assume that there is an adversary that breaks the composition of the key exchange with the protocol. So this adversary interacts with the game GKE sec. Now remember what's here. Here's the execution of the key exchange. When sessions are finished and they get keys, then the keys are used in the later part. So what we do is we take this execution, for which the adversary manages the game that I have to output 1, and we write it in terms. Let me tell you how to do this. If we split the queries that A makes into queries that A makes to KE and queries that A makes to prot, because the queries either go to sessions of the protocol that are in the key stage or in the session of the protocol in the later stage. So if we split this and we get one of these split adversaries, this A1 and A2 are just the same adversaries, just pass state between the two. A1 and A2 are A, but with state being passed between the two. But now we separate it. We can pinpoint, these are the queries made to the key exchange part, and these are the queries made to the protocol part. And now if I put a box around these two components, what do I get? I get an adversary against the protocol, and this adversary only sets keys to the protocol. The top adversary sets keys to the protocol, and the second adversary just tries to break the protocol. And now I use the assumption that there exists key independent reduction. The assumption says I can leave this part put, and I'm only changing the adversary that was breaking the protocol, and I get an adversary that breaks the primitive. By some magic, which I'm not explaining, if you look at what you got in the end, you get an adversary that actually breaks the primitive, and this contradicts the assumption that the primitive is secure when used with keys from the key exchange. Okay, so how do you apply this to TLS? I know that Cedric will talk about real TLS in a few days, so let me make some disclaimers. So we're going to talk about TLS where we ignore many things like cipher negotiation, we ignore many protocols like rekeying. In this work, we did not deal with fragmentation or compression. So it's, we try to get as close to TLS as possible without looking at too many details. So one point that I should point out is that the two different components have many different implementations that one can use. So you can use Diffie-Hellman or RSA to establish keys, and you can use MAC-then encrypt or a stream cipher to implement the secure channel, among many other things. All right. So how do you use this theorem that I showed to conclude security of TLS? And this is where I wanted to answer your question. So the first step is to show that the keys that if you derive keys using the TLS key exchange, and you use these keys for a particular encryption scheme, then no adversary can break this encryption scheme in the sense of a security game called length hiding authenticated encryption, STAR. And the STAR is exactly what I explained earlier. The authentication, you don't break the authentication part if you are playing this message to your oracles. You only break the authentication part if you play anything else. This is the first step. The second step is to show that the security of the secure channel that is implemented by the record layer, that implements the record layer, is reducible via key independence reduction to this LHAE star, so to encryption, to length hiding authenticated encryption, in which you don't accept as forgeries, messages which start with 0, for which the plaintext starts with 0. And then the theorem says now you can use the TLS KE with the TLS record layer and obtain a secure channel. Okay, I didn't write the conclusion of the theorem, but this is what the theorem said. Now, all right, we admit this is not fully modular, and I tried to convince you earlier that I don't think you can actually get full modularity easily. So, because you use the key here, you can't compose it with whatever you want. You have to know what you're composing with. Nonetheless, you get several degrees of modularity, and let me talk about two. One is if you move between different implementation of the key exchange, then if you move between the Diffie-Hellman and the RSA1, you have to do a single. You do this proof that the TLS key exchange implemented with the RSA is okay to generate keys to be used for an LHAE encryption, similarly for DH, and then you reuse the second part. Something similar, but maybe less interesting holds for the record layer. However, you can also do the following: you can refine the latter model in a modular way. So say that you realize, like I realized yesterday, say, that the model for record layer does not take into account fragmentation. So I have a security model for the key exchange composed of the record layer, but that doesn't look at fragmentation. Now, if I want to add fragmentation, what I do is I simply add fragmentation in the security definition for the record layer, and I keep the first step put, and I only need to show that the TLS record layer now with fragmentation reduces to LHJE star. So then I get this reusability. Okay, this is what I said. So let me conclude. All right, I'm again on tape. So you see, it's not always suitable for getting for analyzing security, especially when it comes when you look at real protocol used in practice, and because of issues like joint state, adaptive corruption, which perhaps is is really the deal breaker. One can live with the joint state and session identifiers, but adaptive corruption I think is important, and then that one is kind of brushed under the carpet very often. And what I argued is that you can actually get some generic composition theorems where you look at composing a key exchange with an arbitrary two-party protocol that uses symmetric keys. And I described two theorems. The first theorem shows that the notion of security introduced by Bellari and Rogo is composable, and then you can apply it, for instance, to SSH, JFK, and IKE, protocols which have been shown to be BR secure. And for the case when there's some interaction between the key exchange and the application protocol, I show that you can kind of get some decoupling if you use this key-independent reductions that we have introduced. And okay, well, we're expecting that this key-independent reduction will be used in other scenarios, and we're looking at right now at the security of PKIs. But thanks. UC questions.
What's that?
UC questions.
Easy questions.
You've generalized over key exchange followed by something. Can you generalize over the key exchange as well? Can you? Is there some setting up of shared state or agreement that you can generalize over where you can play the same tricks?
So I generalized by first running
something that generalizes. What's so special about key exchange? Is there something more abstract that you can pull out there?
It's a good question. So let's say first we look at PKI, and then we understand what is the common feature. It's getting. I said in the beginning, getting generic composition of arbitrary games is not something that one can do just because they are so unstructured. You really need to pinpoint, carve out particular application domains. And key exchange and PKIs are two where we see how it can be applied. But
you missed out the other application, which is that with the second notion, you could possibly define key exchange protocols that are not BR secure, but which meet the security definition.
No, but yeah, that's. I mean, we say that TLS is not BR secure, but it satisfies this.
Can you pop back a couple of slides to the last picture that you had?
Should I?
Oh, that's okay.
That
one.
Yes.
So my understanding of these things is that to prove that the record layer reduces via a key-independent reduction to LHAE star encryption is actually very simple.
Yes,
because
it's true.
the record layer is essentially stateful blind hiding authenticating.
But what if you add the fragmentation?
Okay, true, but let's put that to one side for a moment. I think the really hard part is the first part, which is to prove that the TLS key exchange together with LHAE is
true.
So is that something that you've done?
Yes, I think we've done both, right? We've done TLS both for RSA and DH. We showed that they're good for.
In the specific case of TLS, it might well be the case that all of the work really is just pushed into that first step, and it's almost as much work as dealing with the entire record layer.
In the case of TLS, maybe this is the case, but
in general,
generally we don't. Yeah, we can't make this claim.
It would be nice to split the work across the
So
two
actually, for the case of PKI, actually, it's not going to be the case. At least the way I imagine it now. The harder part will be in the later stage, whereas the first part, if you know this work on certified signatures, showing that the signature is a certified signature is not too difficult, whereas the reduction is still going to be hard. So the difficulties move between the.
Yeah. So maybe this is not the cleanest example to illustrate the utility of your approach, because most
true.
of the work still is somewhere.
When we started doing this work, we didn't have any example in mind. We came up with the framework, and then we say, oh, let's look at where can we apply it. And then TLS was one that we were familiar because we looked at its security, the TLS star security, so we knew it.
So a protocol use different primitive. So you have to do this with every primitive.
No,
what the key in the protocol.
What you do, I mean, this really applies to the case when you derive some key material from the key exchange and then use that key material to key something later. You can use, for example, for LHAE, you use this key to key both a MAC and, or you could use, let's say you could use it to key both a MAC and an encryption,
Yes.
but then you just look at that as a single primitive where an adversary tries to break at the same time the MAC and the encryption, and then your security reduction is going to be from a protocol to a primitive, but okay, it's a complex primitive, but still a primitive which uses a single key that comes from the key exchange.
So my question is, so you say that adaptive corruption is easier when you use games, but so what is your rationale? I think if you have equally strong definitions, it's equally hard.
It's true. If if I look at encryption, so I'm aware of game-based notions of for security of encryption, which do not imply simulation-based notions for security of encryption, or they're weaker. But a good level of adaptive corruption is possible, and you can use those definitions to later prove other things. So you can come up with game-based definitions, which are also not, if they are equivalent to the simulation-based ones, you'll not get possibility by resorting to games. No, but games, you have more flexibility with games, I think. Perhaps you can mirror that flexibility with simulation-based notions, but then you really lose what simulation-based notions give you. Nice frameworks.
Okay, so thanks, Speaker.